hey, we don't need AI because it's a useless feature for our industry or for our product, and we believe our product is better without AI.
Eventually, it turns out that their product isn't wanted by anyone.
Junior, mid-level, senior. After a while, you're maxing out.
Do you think engineers will become redundant eventually?
And this is a lesson I think that people should learn very, very early.
I remember you said that you sold your first piece of software at the age of 14.
Yeah, that was ages ago. Back then, so I started coding when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11. It wasn't actually my computer. I borrowed a Commodore 64 from a friend, and mostly used for gaming back then, but I quickly discovered you can also code, and that was quite interesting. And then when I had my first PC a while later, started also developing software and selling it. Back then you had shareware like over CD-ROM still. So that was my entry into the business of software and figuring out, hey, it's not just for fun, but you can actually make some money with it as well.
Yeah, but how did you go about like selling it? Was it like a contest or something?
No, there was two things back. So you had one, you had like the internet was just, this was 96, 97. So internet was around, not so popular, but you could put stuff online, but not really selling software wasn't really an option. So usually what was like, you had the website, people could download like a demo version with some limited functionality. And then when they wanted it, they sent you an email or some form and you shipped them a CD-ROM because that was where it was better. So that was kind of like the way. And then, but that, because I didn't know shit about how to sell stuff, right? So this didn't really work. So the way how it mostly worked was you had back then these magazines which basically had CD-ROM with lots of software on it.
Okay,
and they bought like basically the share. So most of the stuff actually came from magazines which bought random crap like stuff I want and put it on there to say, oh, we have like 100 full version softwares here. And that was kind of like how things started there.
Yeah, this is a bit weird. Like I was born in 96, so I remember when I was young, like around 10 years old, I started like buying these magazines with CDs, but it was like mostly gaming related magazines, but they also had like an accompanying CD. And on the CD, you had like some demo versions of games and on some software. So I can imagine something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so next to the games, there were also magazines which was more like computer, whatever, office related or work related.
Yep.
And they had then random set of utility software on there, like from simple zip software to whatever, like at the end of the day.
Yeah. So how did you eventually transition to like working in startups?
That happened a while later. So because back then I was being an engineer,
Yeah.
back then I was still at school, but then afterwards I studied computer science and became kind of like an engineer and stayed that for a very long time. So I was developing software till I like around first 10 years of my professional career. I was working as a freelancer doing software development mostly for larger companies like SAP, IBM. So helping them develop things, and I was doing backend development, Java, and big data. So was just working on different projects and then doing more and more architectures and development after a while. So it was very far away from startups because it was all about big corporates and big data platforms and whatever they needed. But something that we had was kind of like a friend of mine who was back then, we both kind of became co-founders. We have discussing on and off about like a problem that we've seen with enterprises, which was about, hey, they have a problem connecting the daily workflows with actual data. And that was from this kind of like background, we started, hey, there must be an idea there to kind of like build software. Till this, I didn't know that startups existed as a concept because it was 2011, 12. So startups were still kind of new, at least in my world. They weren't popular in Europe either, from what I remember. And when we thought about starting a company, this kind of like the German way, so I'm from Germany, from the German way back then was usually software companies started mostly, hey, yeah, someone has exactly like us an idea, but you used to be like a consultant. So you start building the software on the side in projects as a consultant. And after a while, you kind of like say, hey, now it's big enough and we can start as a company. But there's always a sliding transition where it starts as a professional side project. And after a while, you have enough to kind of like say, yeah, this is now a thing. There was not this concept of having like a startup as you know it today. It was like, hey, VC funded and thing. So it was a world which wasn't really familiar with. But as we kind of like discovered this and to say, yeah, actually this stuff exists. that's how I kind of like got connected with startup, because it was a bit too slow for us back then to say, hey, we wanna do it the slow way, because it takes years to be at the stage where you have a company. So we basically joined an acceleration program, which back then in Europe there was one, and where we applied, got, I don't know, lucky or good idea, and then ultimately got picked, and that's kind of like how we got into startups. But it went really from, okay, not really knowing that the concept of startup existed, to then being part of a startup acceleration program, how I got into it.
Yeah, so you didn't know that there is like a whole type of business called a startup, where you start like very small, then you raise funding, and then you scale.
Not as it comes to fundraising, that wasn't really for me. I mean, I was sure software companies get started, right, and after a while they get things, but that was more like a concept which existed in the US. And
Yep.
I just because I didn't really hear much about it, and same as I read, the startup scene was much different than it is today. And also keeping in mind, I'm coming from big enterprises, so I worked in smaller companies, like a German version of Booking.com, but all of this was very much far away from what we would call these days startups. So back then, they existed back then, but they were not a world I was kind of like in, or I even knew about for any reason. No.
Yeah, so there is this big difference and sort of discussions for startups about whether you try to go to market like relatively early and start like gaining actual users who are paying you, and then you start like being lean and try to build on top of actual paying users. And there's the other approach where you sort of raise capital, like get loans, and try to basically scale as much as possible. So have you worked on the other side basically?
No, if I was all my startups, also the companies I always worked at, were more on the, no, you have a proper business model from day
Mhm.
one. I'm not good with this. I mean, I'm not big on social media or any of these things. So any of these kind of like more, hey, create users or create something else or work with an idea and to figure out how to make money later, I never really have been part of. I mean, I read about them, I know them, right? But I don't think it's something I'm really good at or good kind of like working with or working in, since it doesn't quite fit with my mindset, where it's like, no, there needs to be some kind of way how you make money with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And money is good, right? So I think VC is a good model, but it's really there to help you get to that stage. Like, but it's not about first let's build something and later see how it solves a problem.
Yeah, because often I have seen like startups without basically getting validated. If some user actually wants to buy the product, they start raising capital, they scale, they get more money, and eventually it turns out that their product isn't wanted by anyone. So the whole like endeavor for like 5 years crashes. So there's like a balance that has to be struck.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, it also shifted, right? I think this was, of course, I mean, everyone knows like .com boom, whatever. I think this
Yeah.
people learned the lesson right now is Corona. I think it always goes, right? If there's more money, sure, there's more risk appetite and things, but I think by now it leveled into, I think, more of a reasonable, this is arguable, right? When I say on perspective, but I think the time where this really happens at scale is kind of like over. I think now more and more is like, yeah, people, it's more, there needs to be a reasonable business model, things need to work out. And it's very, very small exceptions from what I see in the market where there's still like, yeah, here's a lot of money, figure out what to do and come back later kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why I have read about that venture capitalists. They try to fund like tens and maybe hundreds of startups, and they hope that one or two actually make it, so they can recuperate all of their investments. So the hit rate like is very small.
Yeah, I think it depends on the profile, right? I think yeah, I think it's 1 in 10, was it, right? You want one unicorn, like one Facebook, one whatever, and the rest needs half of it is kind of like break
Yeah.
even, and the rest you're writing off. Yeah, I think something like this works behind it. But I think it's also changed a bit, right? In recent times, I think you see more and more investors with less appetite for risk, and now with kind of like Corona and other recent kind of like economic developments, I've heard, at least in Europe, I've seen more and more talk only when there is a clear business problem, like on certain things like Series B, so later stage investment, sometimes even requiring already profitable businesses. But this may be just the world I know. Maybe there's still this world where a lot of VCs currently investing in in companies which haven't really this revenue track. But I think things moved a bit more conservatively in the last couple of years from what I've seen.
Yeah, so you have been a CTO, let's say, in several companies, and when you came to work at your current company where we're both working at the moment, you said that you have worked at earlier stage startups and even being a co-founder, like you said, but now you said that you wanted something, a more established company. We are like 5 years old, I think, at this point, and trying to scale that, you said, was another type of challenge from a technical aspect even. So can you speak about what's the differences between like an early startup, like very early, and a more established one?
I think the main differences, I mean, for me personally, and also as a CTO, is ultimately, as I mentioned, I've founded two companies myself, or founded one company, and another one was in the early stage, very much involved as CTO. And you're kind of like your focus shifts, right? It's in the beginning, you mentioned it as ready, right? It's about, yes, you're validating your idea, you're trying to find product market fit, and you're trying to show that this product can make money if you in the B2B space, and it's not the Facebook approach. That's kind of like the early stage, and that it's very much about higher, you've much less certainty, right? You don't know, hey, does this product work? Does this fit? So it's way more about dealing with uncertainty. And on the tech side, this means some things are not so important, right? You much more things just need to work, and you need to quickly iterate and figure things out. It doesn't have to necessarily be, for example, a great user experience necessarily, if you're really trying to solve a problem, right? Because people figuring out, okay, does this solve my problem? And later you can optimize the user experience, how to sign up, how to make sure that people stick around, and how things go. This doesn't need to be baked into the first part. While as you're going into later stage, and later stage, maybe the good point, like we say, like we found product market fit. So you've proven, hey, you have customers, people are buying it, and you're now just trying to figure out how to make that better, right? Or to either make more money with it or get more customers. There things change, of course, from the point of, yeah, we're not really figuring out anymore, is this a problem people are willing to pay money for? That we've shown. Now, as a business, you're trying usually to show, can we scale this up, right? So instead of, let's say, getting just 5 customers per year, can we get 10 customers per year, 20 customers, 50 customers? So if you have a B2C model, instead of selling, I don't know, 1 pair of shoes per day, can we share 100 pair of shoes per, whatever your business, right? You're just looking at, can you create scale? And can you create it without raising cost at the same time, right? So that you can prove, hey, this is a scalable model. And there are a lot of reasons change, but your tech suddenly also evolves from, yeah, okay, you can't anymore just build stuff and throw away, but now you need to build also your technology, whatever it is, to this model, right? You need to be more sustainable. You need to figuring out, you can't really risk what is working. So you need to reduce, of course, your appetite for risk a bit, because your software needs to be stable, it needs to run. You need to make sure that you're keeping your users, and that your stuff works. While at the same time, you still need to experiment and get things done, because, right, you're still not finished with figuring things out. So you suddenly shift part of your technical efforts to be more mature, more calmed down, more stable. But you're still looking to have this high pace of development in other areas, which changes completely how you need to set up your teams and your mindset and your technology stack at the end of the day.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the best of both worlds, like the middle transition between like a very small company and actually a big established product. And I have seen right now like these online creators which are trying to run like their own SaaS platform or something like that. They take the initial product so far that it's like they built a landing page with an email list. Like, okay, we're trying to build, let's say, AI avatar software or something simple. And they even start marketing that in order to see if they have a product market fit before they start building. So if they cannot even generate like signups for the email, like notification when the product launches, they don't even start building that. So they have taken it to a very extreme side, I would say, just to avoid the initial like tech, like trying to build an actual tech MVP. So they try to just validate beforwards.
Yeah, but so I don't think that's really not a new thing at the end of the day. I'm not sure if you heard of Startup Weekend, but there's a different type of things where your idea is exactly this, right? How do you validate your idea? And it's kind of like a hackathon, like a Startup Weekend,
Yeah.
where you just say, hey, just let's do business validation, right? So putting a landing page online and thing, and this was done already 10, 20 years ago as common means. What's different is now, I think, as you mentioned, AI, in the past, usually this initial step to go from, okay, here's the landing page with a cool value proposition around the software, it still would take you months or something to build something. Today, I think there's so much off the shelf available, right? So you can literally build things much faster. So the step
Yeah.
from landing page to POC, MVP, whatever your level of ambition is, massively shifted at the end of the day.
Yeah, with all the, I mean, as tech evolves, even more of open source software and libraries and ready services that you have available, you can actually, you do not have to build everything from scratch. There is like ready plug and play ways to achieve some functionality. Um, if you are in front of such a decision, whether to like partner with another company or purchase a subscription to a tool, how do you evaluate if it makes sense for your company to partner with some other tech solution, whether it will solve some pain or maybe acquire a smaller team? How do you evaluate those?
I think fun on some aspects, it's not different than making any decision as an engineer, right? Or most people, like, you just like, okay, what is the criteria? What do we want to achieve? And then figuring out what are the advantages and disadvantages of different options, right? Because as same as when making any decision in tech, there's usually a set of trade-offs involved. It's rarely that you have like the silver bullet where everything is right. There's always something which is not perfect. And it's the same decision when it's like going to a make or buy decision and like, hey, do we buy the software? Do we build it ourselves? Or do we acquire potentially a company or a team to build it? It's always the same kind of trade-off. You build your, okay, that's what we want to achieve. So that's why we're doing this. You have a set of criteria, which can be anything from, hey, time to market, for example, how fast do we need to be there? Cost is always a factor. And of course, capabilities, right? Maybe it's features, maybe it's scaling, whatever, but these kind of criteria, and you figure out your part. And at the end of the day, you're trying to make the decision which fits best. That's for most of the these kind of decisions the case. There are some exceptions. So because anything which, for example, is critical to your business, or even critical to your product, where you're looking at like, hey, is this maybe even competitive IP? So a unique, for example, a unique value proposition, which you don't want to be easy replicable. The closer this goes to this kind of areas, you're rather looking at doing it yourself or maybe acquiring versus buying something, because you're trying to add value to what is a commodity. So ideally, when, for example, your company is doing something in AI, you probably don't want to have at the core of this something which anyone can just get the same API and build the same product within a day. So these kind of things, I would rather look at less trying to buy something, but rather see is there a difference, or figuring maybe the reason is this actually a new value, right? It's another question. Like, what's your value add as a company? When you're buying an API, is it really that useful what you're doing? If it's not so, if it's a core to your business and you can buy it off the shelf, does something add up? There is a question mark at the end of the day.
So I guess you try to, first calculate what would be the cost for the company if we are to build such a solution ourselves. Like, how much time would it take? How much money? Are we chasing some deadlines for product features or something like that? And then you basically evaluate if it makes like financial sense to pay that money up front, because if you pay for, let's say, a team of 5 engineers to build it for 6 months, you're paying sort of month by month for those engineers, but you have to pay like some sum up front. So I guess that financial aspect is also another consideration. But do you have to often like butt heads with the business people about such decisions, because you as a CTO you present the tech side of the product, and you sort of do you have to sell them this idea that, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve, will take us 6 months, but we can give that money up front to buy the solution?
I think it depends on your business. So short answer is yes. So this comes up a lot. Depending on as the company goes larger, it happens more often. It's less common in early days because there you usually not faced with decisions hiring 5 engineer or timeframes of 6 months. But as
Yeah.
your company grows, right, this gets more common. And on a high level, like because on the business side, it's usually then less relevant about all these individual aspects. But on a high level, you're talking usually time to market. So how long does it take us to get to the stage where we have something, right? So is it 6 months, 3 months, whatever? Then it's total cost of ownership. So what does this cost you, not just to get to this point, but how does this factor out over 2 years or 4 years at the end of the day? And it goes into IP. So how much does this help us to build out our moat? So what protects us from the competition? That's usually the three main decisions when talking on a high level with a business on, okay, do we buy something, acquire something, look at them. Between those three dimensions, you're trying to find what's the right fit. And a lot of times it's actually a combination of things because you can make trade-offs where you say, okay, we actually now may, for example, spending more money just to go closer to market. But in parallel, we're still hiring a team or building out a new team, but maybe it's a smaller team and we don't take 3 months or 6 months, but 12 months in return. And till then, we're actually just throwing money at the problem to get it solved because we can't wait. And then after in 12 months, right? So usually you come in a combination. Good example is there was about infrastructure in one project where it's like, hey, we need to add certain monitoring capabilities. Buying something is quite expensive because these tools cost money. So something like be it New Relic, Datadog, whatever you're looking at, can easily go into hundreds of thousands for larger teams and especially if they're infrastructure heavy. And for hundreds of thousands, you can also pay a team, right?
Yeah.
And the decisions there was, no, we need to solve some critical monitoring challenges within the next week or weeks. So we buy, but we know we're actually going to pay twice as much as it would cost us when we build it and maintain it ourselves. So we at the same time still build it, but we knew, okay, let's invest not as much, but like a smaller team that just builds out the text, validates it, and really finds technologies which allow us to solve these problems very cost efficient on the infrastructure side and with very low maintenance. So for a while we overpaid, but we solved the problem more or less immediately. And then after 6 to 9 months, we kind of like had a solution which the team could roll out and we could collect the same monitoring data internally at the level of detail we needed. But now the costs were about half or a third of what we would pay if it was a vendor, even if you factor in people costs and everything else.
Yeah, so basically this is your sort of patching a hole basically in the tech stack that so you could build your own solution and then over time because your own solution is cheaper you will make up that money basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
And these solutions, I guess, you like you said, as a company matures more, you can have these, I would say, tools that you can reach for, like or approaches that okay, we can pay this much money upfront in order to like save some time. And as a younger company and a smaller one, you do not have those choices. You do not have even the resources to take this approach.
I think to some degree, yes, you're right. But I think it becomes more and more common that also smaller companies have these choices because, especially with a lot of things around SaaS being available, right, more and more stuff gets commoditized. And so, but yeah, there's a lot of solutions which have like a basic level of entry fee where you say like, yeah, this software you can't buy below 10K, 20K, whatever. And that excludes early stage startups because even if it would be better for them just from an ROI perspective, like, yeah, it would still be cheaper, but for them, the money hurts more than investing time and people in it. It's unfortunately something that you're sometimes forced to say because no, we just can't spend right now cash, but we have people which we have and we can pay, and we can make this trade-off. But now losing 50K from our bank account is actually more of a critical situation. So there you're forced to make sometimes not the best decisions from a ROI perspective, just due to cash constraints.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I'm wondering now that you started like a software engineer basically, and now you're at the CTO level and you have to participate in all of these discussions and figure out all these big decisions, even because they affect the company as a whole. They're not only the tech stack. How do you how did you find that transition? Because you find yourself in like your calendar is full of meetings. You're constantly talking with the CEO, the marketing people. You speak about you speak with customers, etc., which usually for most software engineers this is like hell. They try to avoid meetings with the higher ups. So do you how do you find that?
I think it's probably highly individual on the person. So, I mean, definitely it's a change. So, yeah, you need to get used to it. And so far was lucky that I could slowly slide into it because with my own startup, we kind of like grew from 2 people to 5 to 20 to 25 over a couple of years. So, we kind of like get into this role. And so far, I think some of the things for me were a bit easier because when I was an engineer, I was still a consultant, so I was freelancing, and I was usually working with big companies. So a lot, not a large part, but a significant part of my job back then was already working with stakeholders. You need to find your own jobs. You're not just sitting in a basement and coding. I mean, I also did those kind of jobs, but easily back then already 10, 20, 30% of the job is talking with people, connecting the dots from business. So for me, this was not necessarily that new, or something I was unused to. Did I like it? No, right? So it's something which, as when I was a consultant, this was for me always a necessary evil. I would rather much have preferred to get back to the tech. But as you grow up or gain more experience, you're actually starting to connect the dots, and you see, okay, it becomes more and more important because as an engineer, you're growing, right? You learn your tech, you junior, mid-level, senior. After a while, you're maxing out. Like you're not going to get more effective on code, right? You've seen all the architectures. You can learn any new language you want quickly, and you're not adding much more impact in coding faster or in knowing more technologies or in doing this stuff, right? Sure, this is all important, and you will learn more and more, and you see new domains and new things. But there's a very much lower rate of growth at this point. So to scale your impact significantly from after a certain level, you need to learn more outside of your team and your tech, right? And that ultimately connects at one point to stakeholders, to business, to users. So I think as you grow as an engineer, and no matter if it's now you turn into a CTO track or manager or just more senior individual contributor, I think you need to start making those connections and have those type of conversations. From my side, this I maybe that's a part that for me was easier to understand because I worked as a consultant before, so it was kind of like not a big surprise for me or a necessary evil anymore. But actually, I looked at it as a chance to ultimately have higher impact with the tech and with the coding and everything I do. So that was a bit my approach to this.
Yeah, that's an interesting like way of looking at it, that you have more impact basically, because yeah, I agree that at some point as a software engineer you can only write so much code and like do as many tech changes. But how does one, let's say, start being more than a software engineer, like start having that impact more in a company? Because yeah, you reach that ceiling, let's say you're a senior software engineer, and how do you go to the upper level where you start to make those decisions and have that bigger impact beyond the code?
I think there's kind of like two aspects to this. One is individual, and the other one is a bit on the company or the type of company and culture that you have. And I've seen both. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong. I think this depends a bit on the type of company culture that you experienced, or also what your career track looked like. Um, on the one hand, I think this latest happens when you're going to the senior level and beyond. On the other thing, I think it happens also on the junior level already when you're in a really product and user-centered company, which is in the last couple of years got more and more common, right? Because I think it shifted also that from when you're working on what is it like in some IT companies that develops tax office software for the government, probably you're not faced with this problem anytime soon. But as you're going more into the product space and where it's like, hey, users matter, and the company has embraced these principles, right? Like Marty Kagan kind of thing. So look at the user. The product is ultimately what will drive the company's success. I think there it becomes even for every level of engineer or also designer, no matter if you're junior, mid-level, or senior, you need to start connecting how does the work I'm doing connect to what we're doing for the user. And this is a lesson I think that people should learn very, very early. So even when onboarding junior engineers to a product company, it's very important for me that they get exposure to users. So they join user research sessions, they're watching user interviews, and every technical decisions they make, they understand what is the impact from a user and business perspective. So I think this is something you should start with very, very early in your career. And ideally, you set up your whole company culture, mentoring, coaching people up along this kind of thing. But that may be a special case for if you are this kind of company. I think if you're not this kind of company, this happens naturally only later at your stage of development as an engineer. However, my tip is usually, because my background in the last couple of years is all SaaS software product driven orgs and companies. It's always like, do it rather the user way, the early on in your career. This is something that you will never regret, and it will accelerate your rate of learning. It will allow you to make smarter and better decisions, and it allows you to grow your career and your impact faster, which usually is what people are looking for at the end of the day. But you may not always be in an environment where this is possible in those kind of early situation. It only happens with rank or with things, right? Because some companies are just structured this way. No matter if you're interested, you just couldn't do it from a cultural perspective.
Yeah, so basically try to put yourself in situations where you can see the impact of the work you do beyond, let's say, you receive a task, you finish it, you write the code, you send it, then you pick something else, and you sort of work in isolation, but in isolation in terms of, like you said, you do not see the impact that the customer has, or even when you enter like uh, user experience research sessions with potential customers, for example, you going in would basically give you an insight of what the customer looks like, what they're looking for, and then you will start to make the connection of, okay, this work that I'm doing is solving a problem that a customer I met like 2 months ago is encountering. Anyways, so as people basically develop themselves in a company, how do you go about raising talent from the company, let's say, to a higher level, to a higher position, like give them the skills, educate them, versus like hiring more senior people from the outside?
Mm. My experience that there's always a mixture that you need to do, but also depends on how fast is your company growing. It's different when you're doubling in size every year versus when your company is pretty stable or is growing less quickly. So there, I would apply different strategies, but more generally speaking, I think you're looking at, on the one hand, for everyone in your company, you need to make sure there is a clear growth path. This means, on the one, of course, there's a career ladder, junior, mid-level, senior, whatever it is, right? Companies have different frameworks, but it's important to have something in place. First of all, like some kind of structure that gives people an idea. Hey, this is how I can grow up, like and vertically, like gain more experience. But also, as you get bigger, it gets more and more important. This is how I can grow horizontally, because not everyone maybe is always interested in just becoming a better engineer in this space, but maybe they can move into a definitely a different tech, right? Maybe doing data engineering, infrastructure, back end, front end. So these kind of lateral changes, but even completely switching potentially from hey, maybe I want to become a product manager or some other kind of like roles. I think, but a lot of this only is possible as your company grows in size. So that's the first step. Like have this available, and also make sure it is clearly communicated to everyone. And that's where the second part comes in, which is then the job of managers to make sure to apply this kind of like framework, right? Because you can have the best career letters, the best guidance, the best whatever tutorials, access to resources, and so on. If your manager is not able to have a good conversation with you to figure out what does this mean for you personally, right? And that's where then it comes very important that you make sure you're investing in good coaching and managers, that they're able to work with engineer, for example, to say like, hey, this is where the engineer is at right now, this is where they want to go, and these are the steps to get them there, whatever it means, right? Be it learning certain things or giving them opportunity to apply skills and learn them by working on different types of projects or features, or moving to a different team, or individually doing skill development with them. And a lot of times then with regard to hiring comes, okay, sometimes your company just may not have a certain level of experience, for example. And that's where it becomes very important that you start hiring people which bring in this experience. But this is not something which you should only do. So let's say, for example, your company is rapidly growing and you're just starting to introduce now a staff level or principal level or a new engineering management role. You should never just hire all these people externally suddenly, because that will never go well, because the combination is find some people externally that bring in the experience, and at the same time work on coaching the people you have in your company to get there in case you don't have some that. So you always want to mix, because otherwise you have a big problem on the one hand that people feel, hey, this is not a company I can grow because there's a ceiling, because we're not gonna get the support to grow there. We just rather hire someone and this will happen, which is usually not something which is an environment people want to stay around for a long time.
Yeah, I have been in similar companies where, let's say, I'm on a track to work on a project or up to a position, and we had that opening basically. And as I was getting closer, my development basically stopped, and they decided, okay, we'll hire external people for that role, and then my growth like stopped basically. So that's from an engineering perspective. Like from my perspective, it's demoralizing, I would say. So you say that we shouldn't like just hire like a bunch of senior people and try to have more of a balance.
Yeah, I think you always need to balance this. Now, I've been there myself. Like, specifically as a freelancer, in my early career, I was always faced with this, because that's actually okay. That actually makes sense, right? Freelancers, you're not really, it's not your job. You're getting not career growth. It's your own problem. But so I was faced with this myself a few times. I needed to learn this lesson from that perspective. Being a CTO and growing companies. So just background, so I've grown engineering orgs up to 130 people. So at times though, you have the challenge, you're growing so fast, because developing internally takes a lot of time and effort, right? And there you may up in situations where you suddenly just, hey, do we have the luxury of not actually slowly growing our internal people to this new level where we need people at to get the company and make the company successful? And then it becomes suddenly very tough and complicated, because then, right, you have business pressure to say, no, we need to deliver this, which, okay, we need this experience level, but it would take us 12 months to develop sufficiently internally. So then it is sometimes happening that you're overemphasizing on getting in external knowledge. And that's something you need to then work on really to make sure this doesn't permanently hinder the culture as you've experienced as well. Because then this can basically kill a certain set of morale inside the company and be a big reason why suddenly all the people you have in your company leave, or a large part of them leaves over time, and you're stuck with people that you hired, and you lose a lot of knowledge, but also your whole culture. But it's not always easy to manage this balance.
Yeah, what I'm noticing is the same when evaluating a tech partnership or acquisition. Here it's the same, where you have to find the balance between, here you have on the one side developing the talent like in-house, and then also building a tech solution in-house, and then you evaluate bringing the outside tech solution or the more senior people. So I'm guessing that a lot of your day-to-day, or not day-to-day, but in general, this is a big part of your job currently, to evaluate these two aspects, like in whatever way it applies to the startup.
I guess so, yeah. I think this just shifts, but for me, this is on a conceptual level not different to being an engineer, right? Because your job is also managing trade-offs. It's rarely that as an engineer you're making decisions. It's all about trade-offs. You always look, oh, do I do this? Do I pick this library? Do I build it myself? Your scale just changed, right? You're shifting this problem not anymore from, do I pick this library, or do I build this, or do I do it this way or that way? You're shifting it to, do we hire these people or do we buy this, right? So I think just your scope shifts, but the fundamental problem is still the same. We're all managing trade-offs, just in different roles and different things, and trying to find the best option or solution for problems that we're faced with.
Yeah, this was like a big revelation of mine when I was like a more junior. Like when I started working, it was, okay, what's the best tech stack to learn? What's the best approach? Okay, when I learn this, I'll be set. And as I became more senior, you basically realize everything is a trade-off. There's no best approach, and in different situations, different approaches and trade-offs have to be considered. And like you said, that basically the game remains the same. You're evaluating decisions with more impact as you become like more senior and management level and CTO.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think it's at the bottom. At the end of the day, it's always the same kind of like games that you're in. Um, I think what maybe changes is ultimately one the timeline, right, until you see results and the impact of your decision. Because if you pick an implementation approach, for example, and say, oh, do I pick this architecture pattern or this, or do I pick this library or that, and you're gonna figure out quite quickly if you've done your testing well. Oh, okay, this doesn't perform as fast as we should, so let's revise that decision. And at worst, it takes you to production until you hit a certain level of traffic or something. But it's usually earlier to fix, right? And as your decisions grow, you're gonna see the effects in the longer term. And that's kind of like the biggest thing to get used to as you grow in your career and see, yeah, whatever decision I make, I'm not gonna see immediate or near in time the result, but it may take months to if your decision actually was the right one given all
Yes, so
the
I guess this
constraints.
is where experience comes into play, right? Because you have to know, because there is less room for error in a sense, because when you make a decision and the results will be visible in 6 months or 1 year, you have to be able to envision what's going to happen, or you would need to have been in similar situations where this timeline has sort of perspired in a similar way, so that okay, we can make this decision, and for the next 6 months we won't see results, but we will have to make that commitment and basically know, or at least have faith that we made the correct decision.
Yeah, no, exactly. Or especially then also depends, right? Some decisions are one-way decisions, so it's impossible or very expensive to revise them. Others you can still manage. Okay, hey, we do it step by step, or we can always go back. Then it shifts, right? But yeah, a lot of decisions. I mean, these get more and more common. The bigger the impact of them is, or the larger the scope. A lot of them are kind of like one way or very expensive to undo, which usually means they're turning into one way decisions, at least for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, so I guess, have you been in a situation, for example, where you make a big decision and there's like a several months commitment, like let's say 6 to 12 months, and then you have to basically scrap it, or there is like doubts about the approach, even from the business side or the financial side, you have to justify your decision, and there's like discussion whether to continue with the commitment or pull the plug early. Like how do you approach that?
So yeah, definitely there have been those decisions. Most of them are like this. So most of them luckily are evolving slowly over time, and you can observe, right? So it's that's the main ultimately the main vehicle you have to make sure to have them. So make sure ideally structure the solution so that your decision in a way that you can do it incrementally, right? Same as doing technical changes. At least my approach is usually applying at a company level or at a larger org level as well. Try to make them incrementally and learn and improve and adapt step by step, right? So as much as possible, I prefer structuring things that this is possible. However, it's not always possible, right? And then for me, the main important thing is always to have metrics in place. And in absence of metrics, qualitative success criteria, but always looking back at your decision, like, why do I make it? What do we want to achieve? And do we have it right? And then make sure you have some kind of means. And ideally, it's a metric. If it's not a metric, milestones, whatever else, make sure you can check along the way. Are we on track to achieving our goals that we set out with this type of decisions? So that you know as early as possible that you need to ideally just change course and change plan. But worst case, also know, okay, hey, this isn't not going to work. This decision was wrong. Let's undo it or scrape it, whatever it is. So to know when to stop doing something. That usually goes all about keeping an eye on why did you do it, what are your goals, and then just checking in on progress on this success.
Yeah, I guess this is a big positive of being in the tech space or in the software that everything can have some analytics like live metrics, so you can start monitoring. Because if you have something like you open a gym or a supermarket or something like that, another type of business like with physical stuff, you cannot prematurely evaluate whether a decision is going to work based on the data you start to receive. You just have to close your eyes and hope that your investment works.
To some degree, yes. So luckily these days, a lot of stuff can be quantified with data, right? So even opening a gym or something, I think there should be means to evaluate this market research, similar things. So I think yes, there are those decisions, but in tech, I think we're a bit easier to have some. It's easier for us to get this validation. I think that's what makes us lucky, because you can always ask users. There's a lot of experience, and usually getting measurements in place is something we're quite good at. What I've seen more is I think people in product or in tech were more ingrained to do this, while others may have the possibility to also do decisions this way, but they just never got trained to do this, or it's not natural for people, so they don't do decisions like this. But technically they could. It's just not something that they consider, because people haven't learned this, right? If you're opening a restaurant, maybe in whatever, some town or something, you don't really think about concepts like this, because you don't think about data and things. You think more about business plan. Okay, what do I pay for the rent? But okay, can I predict the number of people that would come in, or do some research there? Maybe that's a concept which is not natural to people in certain other domains.
Yeah, you cannot A/B test your menu layout or your approach to serving the food, for example.
Interesting thought. I would argue you could, but maybe it's not possible.
Yes, but it's not as straightforward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have had this discussion with a friend of mine. He's like DevOps, and he also opened like a supermarket. And we were discussing about, he was telling me about like the whole process, and now that he's trying to figure out, okay, what are people like looking for when they enter a store, like what are the products that they first see, etc., etc. So I started to think, like, if this was like a website, like what we're currently doing even in our company, like we track, okay, does this user click here first, or does it click here first? How much time does he spend on this page? Does he leave the website afterwards? So these type of metrics we are sort of lucky to have, because we can adjust our product basically on the fly.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. Not sure if you heard, was it Amazon or one of the big they tried like going from like just being a virtual store to like a physical store, right? And their store was actually instrumented like hell, like camera sensors everywhere. So they tracked the real world equivalent of all these metrics, but also only because they basically coming from this background, right? So it's definitely not something that the average person that opens the store suddenly would think of.
Yeah, I think Amazon, they opened a store where they track each person inside of the store, and they can see, okay, he grabbed like a milk, he grabbed eggs, then they calculate like his basket, like what's inside, and he just leaves. And because his debit card is connected, they just take out the bill basically from his credit card, and he just leaves. There are no like shares, nobody.
Yeah, and I guess I get all the equivalent of like time on site. What other products did you look at? How much time did you spend from another shelf? So you technically you can probably get the same data from a physical shop as you get from a website, but it's
quite expensive.
much more expensive.
Yeah. How do you go about? We talked about like developing talent or hiring talent, but how do you create like a solid team? Like develop the teams, basically setting up their workflows, like how well they work together. How do you approach that?
I think that there's two levels probably. One is on a team level, and then okay, at the moment you have more than one team or two team, then you start thinking, okay, how do you orchestrate multiple teams? For me, on the individual team level, so single team, I have not found like a fixed formula. I think teams are too diverse to kind of like say, hey, this is what works. So I think there for me, it's always about, hey, make sure you have the right people in the team, or at least some people that are experienced enough to make sure the team can organize itself, that they're finding the right structure that works well for them. However, there of course are a set of just best practices which are usually good. So it's always about, for example, make sure teams have a clear goal, right? So it's a clear mission. They know why they exist, what they're working for, why they're doing it. Second thing for me is like make sure the team is staffed right. So do they have all the necessary skills, the right mix of experience, the right mix of what is needed to kind of like get the job done. And last but not least, from an external factor, right, as a company, make sure you create the right environment for the team to perform. Again, this can mean different things depending on your product, your culture, and so on. It's also different. Are you in a regulated space or in a spare? But this could, in general, this means things like an environment of trust, an environment where like failure is appreciated and not appreciated, but it's encouraged as you're okay to fail as long as you learn from fix it, right? We don't want people to act stupid, but those kind of things. So all these factors together, but this is all just really external factors and best practices. I wouldn't really prescribe necessarily what teams do internally, because I think that's just usually there is no right size fits all, right? Of course, yeah, don't do stupid things, right? Yes, we write unit tests, do this, communicate early and often, but beyond that, the specifics, I'm really not that hung up on, or could say, oh, this works. What I usually just say is when you're starting a new team, start with the basic, like as Scrum, yeah, it's not the best, but it works. So when you're just starting out, new team, new people, no one knows everyone, just pick a template, stick with it. But from there, dramatically learn and improve continuously and figure out what works for you. But just to get kicked off, pick what everyone knows and then go and get better. Yeah, I think that's only what I would answer that on a team level. As you go one layer up, like how do you organize now 2, 3, 4, or at one point 10, 15, 20 teams? Things change massively, and that's a part, honestly, I'm also still trying to figure out, because this is also always different again, and there's no fixed part. Probably the biggest lesson, if I look back, like to make that work, is the same one. Make sure each team exists and has their place in the big picture, right? So which starts with your team topology. So make sure the teams you're having fit with your business strategy, and they're fitting a purpose, right? So don't randomly assemble teams and say, okay, we need a team for product A, product B, product C, but rather make sure that across your teams, you have the right architecture and topology, which fits with your business use case, your product portfolio, your tech, and so on.
Is it like in terms of technical stuff, like so that each team has a space, or even for like, I would say, moral side, that each team knows, okay, I'm a part of this company and the work that my team does has this type of impact?
Mostly the latter, at least on a conceptual level, right? And I think that's the most important part. Like when you look at the pieces you have in place, okay, you have here's your company, you have a strategy. So that's where you have goals. That's the goals, and you want to say this is where we want to go how we want to get there. That's a strategy, and then you need some kind of product equivalent of this, right? You say you have a product strategy. You say, and to execute on this product strategy, we believe these are the right teams, and they're set up this way to pay towards this common goal. And then, of course, the first part you mentioned, like technology and having their own space, and conference architecture, microservices, and so on coming to play. It's usually this is more of a constraint or something you have to work with, because most companies have stuff running, right? Especially at the scale when you have multiple teams. So usually this is rather a problem you're trying to weave into the ideal structure and evolve into, rather than an enabler, because most of the times companies have an existing product, which means an existing tech stacks and software. And especially in the scale up phase, so when you're going from startup to scale up, that's a bit of a mess naturally, because you're coming out of this experimentation phase and you have a lot of stuff that you tried. And now you actually know what you want to do, and you can start having a proper, more long-term strategy, which means also you have teams which have more of a long-term goal and stay in a fixed structure for a while, but your tech is absolutely not matching that structure. So you're usually evolving into this quite a bit. So it's rather a problem, not a solution for your team setup.
Yeah, what you said, that even for a morale standpoint, when I have worked in, let's say, in certain teams where I'm working on a product which is going to be launched in 6 months, in 12 months, and you sort of do not see the impact of your work. And like we discussed, this is like a bet that we have to see if it pays off in 6 months or 12 months. But on the other hand, you see the rest of the company, let's say the rest of the teams are constantly, they're the ones making the money, and they're the ones whose product is in the hands of the users, and there's like actual feedback, and they're making the impact. So I would say it is good to let the teams know of their place in the company and how their team and how the work that they do fits in the bigger picture, because it would be sort of discouraging, like sort of you're looking from the sides how the company is operating and you're working on something that is for the future that may or may not work.
Yeah, no, fully agree. Especially, I think it's okay. Also, it's okay to have teams which working on stuff which is not directly contributing to something that's important right now. But you should set the scope like this, right? Say, hey, you're experimenting, or you maintaining this old piece which is not important right now. Blah blah. I think it also exists, right? We all live in a real world, but I think it needs to be called out and people need to be aware of it. But yes, I think there's plenty of not unfortunate. I think it's just part of the job. Like, right, same as yes, everyone fixes bugs, everyone deals with legacy tech, and sometimes you also have teams which maybe don't have the most glamorous or highest impactful job, but it's something which is part of the business. So this also happens often enough.
Are there any challenges, or there are challenges, but are there any differences between like a remote team, like a fully remote company, and let's say you have a physical office where everybody's working there, in terms of team organization and how to basically get everybody working together?
Definitely, and I think myself as well. I think we as an industry are still learning that, right? I mean, Corona obviously was a bit of an accelerator and a big shift in mindset and setup for everyone. But yeah, there are definitely differences that you need to take into consideration, from everything from hiring to team culture to how do you work, right, as a team? How do you plan as a company? How do you communicate? Also, how do you get feedback? How do you? I think there's so many aspects to this. So yes, definitely there is a big difference, and mostly also I think we're still figuring things out, because I think everyone's like, oh, we've figured things out. I think we're far away from that. So for me, for example, the most important difference is just this having face time. Right, we all know, yes, when we're coding or when we're doing X, Y, Z, when we're doing our individual deep work, no matter what our role is, doesn't matter, right? And also for daily status check-in, it doesn't matter. But for me, it's the most important part where I'm trying to figure out how to get this make this work effectively remotely, is to say, let's get together and hash out a problem, where you just need to talk, where you need to be in a room, where you need to be on a whiteboard, whatever you're doing, and get things done. And that, for me at least, I haven't figured out how to translate this experience effectively into a remote team or remote organization or any kind of remote setup. So I think there are some things which for me are not replaceable in a remote setup, that are quite easy to solve in a face-to-face setup. So I know a lot of other companies claim it's possible, but just I haven't figured it out yet how to do it.
Yeah, I guess each approach has like its pros and cons. Like, I guess for fully remote teams, you have access to more talent. You can hire worldwide in a sense. And yeah, this face-to-face interactions are missing. Ever since Corona hit, I have also been like fully remote. My previous company switched from like on-site to remote, and now we're in a fully remote company, sort of like we have the Berlin office. But I see even in Bulgaria, most companies offer remote work, but let's say once or twice a month, everybody goes to the office, and then they have that face-to-face meetings where they go into a big conference room with whiteboards, they start drawing, and then they have the brainstorming sessions, which I guess it's needed.
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think don't get me right. I think we all can agree, yes, everything we can get done remotely, no discussion. So I think that's
Yeah.
proven. And I think then just talking about then trade-offs, like what things, right? What are you trading off? Is it, yes, team culture, maybe efficiency, but maybe, and I think that's where it becomes an interesting, but maybe not just efficiency at one point, but also actual results, right? Like other things you would not get or that you would not get at so quickly, and it takes you maybe way longer to get to certain decisions or to get to certain insights or to get to certain realizations as a team that would have gotten faster when you get together, right? And Sam, yeah, I don't have the right answer for that. I think for me also, I think the best setup is some kind of hybrid where you're figuring out your yes, getting people together or the right people together, maybe not everyone, but I think certain people on a team level or on a discipline level, getting together and regularly and solving certain problems in person has a much better result than not doing it. But I think the other part works, right? There are companies like, I think, yeah, GitLab is a good example, like fully remote since ages. I'm not sure if they have offsites or things or they get together regularly, but I think they're proud of like fully remote, no touch needed kind of like working culture, and it works. A successful company, great people work there. So I think you just need to optimize for your setup, right? Pick one and then make sure you're solving all the downsides of it in an effective way.
I mean, it's good at least even in the sense to be able to meet your colleagues in person, because sometimes you have not seen them, like you have worked in a company for X amount of time and you have not seen them, only on Zoom or online, and that gives a more of a perspective of your team members, because you can see them in context outside of their work, and then you can uh, basically understand the way they speak. Because I have had many instances where there is a colleague that you interact with online and you think, oh, he's always angry, he's always pissed off, he doesn't like talking, etc., etc. But then you meet him and you figure out that that's just the way he speaks. He's very helpful, he's friendly, and now you have more of a rapport between one another. And you, next time you're working remotely and you interact with him, okay, you have that context, you did X, Y, and Z, you went for dinner, you know some jokes about them, you can speak for something outside of work, which helps, because before that we were just like faces on a screen, and this can impact the work even.
Yeah, definitely. Same for me. I think similar experiences. You're like, yeah, some people that your perception is totally off just based on
Yep.
virtual means, and you meet them in person, you suddenly have a fully different impression, down to like going from, okay, this is someone I can work with, but I'm not gonna be more with her. Then you meet them in person, and your whole perception changes. So I think that's definitely true. But I think also same there, right? The argument that companies that are fully remote or so are going more is, these are things you can fix, right? In a way. So, for example, social time you can schedule. You can make sure there's some kind of exchange, virtual lunches, and so on. Virtual team events exists. So I think that there are ways to mitigate that. If they will replace meeting someone in person, I highly doubt at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd say those like online lunches, team lunches, sort of work. I mean, they're better than nothing. So they do give that context to your team members. So I mean, I'm speaking from experience that whenever you have had that, you feel sort of closer with your team. So it's even more pleasant to work with them, because there's a little bit of something beyond work. Because if it's like, hey, what's the status of this ticket, hey, have you done your part of the task? So I don't know, I guess we're wired that way to work better with people who we can know something personal, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. But also, since I think my opinion changed a bit from like, yeah, this won't work, to, hey, there are ways to work around it. We also, during Corona especially, right, you were forced to do it, even like social events, even if you wanted to, you couldn't. And then being as a forcing function, I think was quite nice to widen a bit the horizon of what is possible. Because doing then what we have, like virtual cocktail class, for example, yes, you can actually have like a very informal team event together. That it's still, of course, not the same as really getting together in the real world, but where you have like interactions which take you outside of the scope and really down to like a team event kind of feeling. But yeah, at the end of the day, this personal human interaction is still missing, and it's quite different, at least for me, there. But I'm definitely more optimistic towards remote work since Corona, since I would have been before. So it definitely did a mental change for me. Hey, stuff is possible, which previously I was very much in favor of. No, co-located teams, they're the highest performing teams. But I think a lot of this got a bit more. No, doesn't have to be. There are a lot of other models. Just you need to optimize for them as well.
Yeah, for me it's sort of weird because I can work remotely like forever. I would say I can like spend the whole day by myself, and people usually ask me, "Okay, don't you miss the office? Don't you miss like people?" And I usually don't. But in terms of not that I don't want to see my team, but I'm, I guess, more introverted in that way that I can spend the whole day inside by myself, which I guess is helpful. But I know in this context, but I know people who the the second week after they let us go for Corona, I mean, they sent us home. He was going crazy. Like we had the remote meetings, but he wanted to meet people, to speak with them. He wanted to be in office, to go to people's desks, etc., etc. So I guess it's sort of even personal where you fit on that spectrum.
Yeah, no, definitely. Same here. I've seen both, everything from like, yeah, people that also sometimes just outside of personalities, there's also just pure physical constraint, right? If you have family, kids at home, Corona, of course, and even there, where kids can't go to school or something, you don't, maybe some people don't even have a home office, right? Of course, some of that has changed now in the last couple of years. But I think there's lots of reasons what works better, and it's a mixture between individual, some other constraints and factors that go in from an environmental perspective. But yeah, I guess we all figured a way around it by now, and I think by now we can optimize for all these different personal or environmental factors, right? I've seen now people that, for example, they're okay actually with remote work, but they still rent like a desk at a co-working space
Yeah,
to work. So I think there's all these variations now which we've seen. Hey, they exist. Let's make use of them.
yeah. I guess we adapt. I want to change a bit the course of the discussion. You have worked, you said, with big data in the past, like at your first jobs. How was it? I mean, what were you doing with big data? Because right now, with the AI and machine learning being everywhere, everything is basically dependent on that big data and gathering it and transforming it for the AI, for the machine learning models to train them. What was happening, let's say, 10 or 15 years ago?
I think the main difference from back then and today is back then when people spoke about big data, it was mostly companies that looked at this, or companies discovered it, right? So I think first keep in mind I'm speaking about my professional experience. Of course, there exists a whole different world, but and you had what Google, I think, indexed the web since whatever, and companies doing it apparel. So I think big data has been around, just the buzzword has been around since then. But I think what changed was that 10, 15 years ago was the first time that the average enterprise or somewhat larger company discovered, hey, there is value in data that we have, which we haven't exploited so far. I think that was the biggest shift with this first big data wave that came 2005 till 10 maybe, where previously there were companies which had as a business, right? Like Google, probably was always a big data company, but it became aware as a opportunity to companies. That was different, and it was hey, there are no technical means to exploit this in a way. But that was all still company and internally in a way. So it was big data back then. How I got into it, how I started using it. And then what shifted, of course, to is now AI being more prevalent, but also outside of its recent developments with ChatGPT and other large language models, was that public data or more user data became available, right? So the gathering data for the explicit purpose of gathering it and having it available, that shifted compared to 10, 15 years ago, because initially people just were starting to discover what can we use or make better use of the data which is there and get as much of the data which is there into a useful context and process it, analyze it, and utilize it. These days, I think it's more and more about how do we actually collect and generate big data ingrained into the products we're building and our usage, right? I think that's the main difference looking at it from 10, 15 years ago to today, from my perspective.
Do you think now that these companies, even like social media and Google, they're using the users' data to basically train their algorithms, or even OpenAI, they're using users' data to train their algorithms and machine learnings? Do you think that there should be like stricter restrictions basically on the user's data to be able to control, okay, my type of data, I do not allow, let's say, for machine learning models to use my data for training, or for a social media to give my information to, let's say, people who, to businesses who are looking to market on the platform? Do you think basically people should be compensated even?
I don't know about compensation. I think that's hard to say. I think my basic, my personal take is always, I think user data needs to be dealt with appropriately, right? And there's data which honestly doesn't matter, and a lot of times you also always. So I think so it's important what type of user data you're talking with. And I think then the second part, which is important for me, is whatever is done with the data should be transparent to the user, and really transparent, not just write some legal thing or whatever. And of course, it should be opt out, configurable, whatever. So I think there's a couple of constraints, right? Like visibility, privacy, security. All these things should be possible for the user to see, change, and understand. And then after that, I think the rest, there are exceptions, right? There are something like health data, of course, is different and stuff. After that, I think it should be up to companies to use it. And then if users don't wanna share data, but companies then say, hey, yeah, we'll pay you for it, sure, go for it. But I think it should be more like a case by case decision based on the companies and the user's choice. The problem, though, is unfortunately, right, companies are not inherently evil, but it's not necessarily a motivation for companies to do this. Especially, right, it's mostly legal frameworks which bring companies to do this, not companies voluntarily. And sure, there are exceptions, right? There are companies which are using this even as a key value proposition or business value, unique value proposition. But unfortunately, in general, companies are not wired that way because they're commercially oriented, yada yada. So that thing. So hence, yes, there needs to be strong regulation to do this where necessary. The second part for me, which is so way more important, is user education, because I think we're in a lucky position. We know this stuff, right? Especially with front-end developer or something. Hey, cookies, all this stuff is second nature. We know what's technically possible. Browser fingerprinting to work. All these things we're quite well off in knowing this. We know how to protect ourselves. We know how to work around this if needed, right? Like, I don't know, you have a script blocker probably installed. Most of us have. We know how to get around this stuff, how to use VPNs. And I think that's where the average user, unfortunately, is not. And for this reason, I'm always a bit more on the, hey, unfortunately, we need to, we would be relying right now more on legal frameworks to mitigate uneducated users. I would love to turn it around and actually have less legal regulation, and rather have it more up to personal choice and users and companies finding ways through business models. But given the level of knowledge in this and the incentives of companies, I think we're down to legal frameworks, which I'm personally though not a fan of. I would rather have a different world.
Yeah, I when I visit my grandma, she always says, okay, can you look at my phone? Can you look at my phone? Something's wrong. And I go and try to fix it. And they're not like knowledgeable. They're not like educated. They do not know what's happening. So they click everything. Basically, they become sort of victims of spyware, or they even have ads on their lock screen. I don't know how you can achieve that, but they click something and now they have ads everywhere, even in their settings. I don't know what's happening. But yeah, even for younger people who are more like tech savvy, they're not fully aware of how much their behavior is being monitored and used by companies to make money. And even something like the GDPR, where we had to install all these cookie notifications. It was like the goal of it was so that all of the companies who use user data have an even playing field. So let's say a small company can compete with Facebook by by Facebook being transparent about the data they're collecting, but in the end nothing happened. Like there wasn't any results of that, and now we just have the experience of browsing the internet like ruined for everybody, because there's constantly pop-ups, and even if you enter a website you have the I accept the cookies or I decline. When you click decline, you're not entered in the website. Basically they say you need to allow us to use cookies and like use your data. So I guess that companies have to, I guess maybe they do, when you register for Facebook, they have maybe some tiny like terms of service. Okay, we're going to be using your data to improve our algorithm and stuff like that. But I think that that's the limit. People will not stop using Facebook, for example, because like you said, they're not aware. And even if they were, Facebook can maybe just slap a pop-up like the cookie pop-ups that we see, that in order to continue using our website, we need to access all of your data.
Yeah, no, I think that's same there. I think part is just business model companies, right, and others is also users being tired of it already. But what I've observed, so this whole, I mean, GDPR thing overall had a very positive effect, and for a lot of different reasons. Not necessarily cookies is not the prime example of it, but I think what definitely I can see also, like since my parents or people which are not really technical, uh, there is, at least in Germany, and people there is more awareness now, so people are a bit more conscious. So I think that at least is a result. And yes, we all click away the damn cookie banners by now, but I've seen more and more awareness and consciousness in some decisions. Like, hey, do I really need this service? Do I really need to sign up here? Do I really need to share my credit card here? These kind of things become a bit more prevalent since GDPR is around.
Now I see that every company sort of has AI in their marketing and in their product. Let's say, okay, we're using AI for this, and for the regular person they say, oh, they're using AI, they must be very fancy, where most of the times it's like a wrapper on ChatGPT or something like that. Do you think that companies should basically use AI even a minimal amount, just so that they can say, okay, we're using AI from a marketing standpoint even?
I mean, there's also a question like what I think is, it's like probably yes, because you don't want to left behind, right? So just yeah,
Yep.
right now everyone is jumping on ChatGPT, just yeah, put the damn buttons there, and even if your software has nothing to do with AI, you probably find a text box where you can generate text. Do it because everyone does it. Yes, there's no reason not to do it right now. If it's useful, it's a whole different discussion. And there's an argument, though, for example, to say if you're not doing it and can exploit that as well, like saying, hey, we don't need AI because it's a useless feature for our industry or for our product, and we believe our product is better without AI, go for that as well, right? So I think, but you need to have a statement ready or a strategy ready how to do it. It doesn't have to be adopt AI. It can also be we don't need AI, but then it's for these reasons, and ideally communicate them. You can, maybe it's even an opportunity for you in your business and your company. So yeah, it doesn't have to be adoption, but I think you need to be aware of it, look at it, and have a stance and a strategy how to deal with it. And you definitely, if it's impacting your industry and the marketing side, you need to deal with it as well, right? But it doesn't mean you need to build it necessarily for whatever reason into your product. If you find different ways to work with it.
What about the engineering aspect? Do you think engineers will become redundant eventually? Did you see the release of Devin AI?
Devin AI, was this the whole generate project level stuff? And
Yeah, they even had it like completing Upwork assignments for a code, for example.
okay, no, Devin, then I haven't seen this one, but yeah, similar things I've seen. Um, I I don't think so. I think it will be a productivity tool, same as a lot of other things which came in recent years, right? You can argue if it's a better or worse productivity tool with a huge higher impact than others. But I think it will be a natural thing. Like, for example, what have been other areas, like when suddenly when the cloud came around to like fully manage things, right? It was a similar aspect. You suddenly didn't need a hardware knowledge anymore or hardcore sysadmin knowledge. Everyone could provision a server, configure it, and deploy it. Just your average infrastructure engineer just got more effective, and your average developer got more capabilities and got more effective. So that's how I look at AI in coding. It will make developers more effective, and that means just naturally the bottom 10% of tasks suddenly will get automated, optimized, and whatever. Maybe that are those Upwork tasks. And also for the average engineer, yes. I use it myself. I definitely am brighter in writing unit tests and skeletons for unit tests. So it's even faster than whatever other tools exist. We're taking care of the average thing, but it's ultimately a more effective autocomplete. That's how you can use it. And beyond that, you're still, how much actual time is an engineer coding at the end of the day? It's enough, but it's not all of it. So yes, makes engineers 5, 10, 20, whatever, X% more effective on the actual coding part, but it doesn't make us all more effective on our average job. But it will have a huge impact on a certain type of engineer and a certain type of development, definitely.
Yeah, I'm asking because there is like these companies right now are very not hiring even junior people. Even if companies start open positions, they are constantly looking for senior people, and I guess people are afraid that the barrier for entry is like very high right now for the software space, and the traditional path is probably disappearing, where you get a degree somewhere and then you go to be a junior developer and then you like climb the ladder in a sense. But now people are fearing that will disappear.
Can be. I haven't really heard that or thought about it. I think it will make junior developers more effective. So, for example, AI coding tools are much more of help for junior engineers and for senior engineers, right? And I think it will probably accelerate their learning on certain areas. But the one thing which ultimately is a danger is there, if people adopt it wrongly, and for this means, right, you're going to start out with this, you're going to get started ChatGPT or whatever, or Copilot, Code Whisperer, whatever you're using. But you're not really building out these concepts, right? I think at the end of the day, no matter what type of engineering you're doing, if you're a senior engineer, you need to have figured out concepts, which, for better or worse, is computer science.
Yep.
You can argue now, do you need like hardcore knowledge down to how does the CPU work, or is it rather this or that? But you need a level of theoretical knowledge, or you're just not going to be good at your job. Doesn't mean you don't have a job. I think there's plenty of companies that will hire not well performing engineers on a senior level as well. But I think to be good at your job as an engineer, and I'm not sure if it's maybe that push now, maybe you only need it now when you have 10 years of experience or 8 years of professional experience. Maybe you can, with now AI tools around, you can push this moment out. But sooner or later, you need to have understood the concepts, or you're not going to be able to do a great job.
Yeah, I agree with that. I asked because I have people who are entering the tech space, and I remember like 2 years ago, or even 1 year ago, there was like a lot of junior positions open in the market. Like there weren't that many, but you could look for a place where you can start your first job. And I have people who I know that are entering the tech space now. They cannot find like any entry level position anywhere.
Okay, it's interesting. I haven't observed that. I mean, in general, I'm not sure if this. And I think one factor could be there is by now a lot of supply of junior as well, right? In the last 2-3 years, coding boot camps like Iron Hack, Boot Up, how it's called. Yeah, these things became very prevalent. And I think compared to, I remember when I was in Berlin, when I moved here 6-7 years ago, there was a junior developer meant computer science student or someone switching careers and learning it themselves.
Yep.
3 years later, 4 years later, so 2-3 years ago, we have coding boot camps. So I think always in Berlin, we're probably churning out by now upwards of 1,000 or so junior web developers per month. So I think there's the supply massively increased. But it's an interesting point if actually the demand got down due to AI developments. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Okay, I want to basically wrap it up with some rapid fire questions. And so, what is your strategy for learning new things, new technologies or new concepts?
Reading hacker news, blogs in general. Those are more the CTO side. And also books when there's a topic like I really want to get about. It's kind of like the part I'm having.
So basically, you use online to see what's happening if there's something new emerging, and then you use a book to dive deep if you something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Conferences as well. So, but that's a long tail.
Yeah. How do you basically clear your head from work? What non-technical stuff do you do or enjoy doing?
I play computer games and I run a lot.
Well, playing computer games is still like technical. Okay.
Then I guess running and golfing.
Yeah. What, from an outsider perspective, like from non-technical person, what do you think are common misconceptions of what you do or what we do even as a field?
I think what I do as a CTO, a lot of times my mom still thinks I'm coding or fixing printers. So I think that's probably a misconception on the one hand for my job specifically. And I think on engineering, I think it's that engineers only code. That's the biggest misperception. Or that the job of an engineer is to code, which is, it's true, but it's by far from the level of things that an engineer does.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, how has something that you perceived as a failure in the past turned into something good down the line?
You mean something I did or like an industry development or something?
I don't know, something that you experienced. It can be both.
I think a good example on that is probably at my previous company where we started out with the question, what should the engineering manager role look like? And does it have to be technical? There was not just at the previous company, but also before that was a question like, can you have managers of engineers which are not technical? In recent years, it means engineering manager. Before that, it was just team lead, whatever you had. And it was common. So it was when I was a consultant, you had companies where you had managers who weren't technical. So it was quite common in enterprises already. And now you have to can have the conversation again when you have more product companies, engineering managers. Can you have someone who is maybe a good people manager, let's say a product manager or scrum master, right? Could they run a team from an engineering manager role perspective? And what changed for me is so I think some decisions I had where we said like, I think, yeah, it's possible, and tried it and it worked kind of, but I think it wasn't really effective. So I think the mistake was like saying, yes, you can have non-technical people being an engineering manager if they fulfill other criteria. But so I think that was not a failure, but it wasn't really a best decision. But what I took away from it and how it turned out as good is it really gave me a lot of appreciation for good engineer. There's much more than just the technical part of a thing. So I still think you need to have been a senior engineer before you become an engineering manager. But I think the evaluation needs to be much more on the non-technical side than I have looked at it before. And having some people in this engineering manager role who weren't engineers by education gave me a lot of appreciation for that. But I think it was not a best decision to have those people running engineering teams at times.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have been in places where the best engineers were promoted to engineering managers and they had like zero people skills. And that resulted in frustrations and the team not functioning properly. So I agree that an engineering manager should be more management than engineering. So I fully agree with that. So my last question is, what is something unusual that you love that nobody would guess? Maybe you like soap operas or I don't know.
I'm afraid I'm too boring for this question. I like golfing. That's something people always look like I'm too young for golf or something. Maybe that, I don't know. It's the best I have.
What, they think it's an old person activity?
Yeah, exactly. In Germany, at least, like golfing has a snobby old person. It's not a sport kind of thing.
Is there like a golf scene basically in Germany? Like,
Golf is quite popular. Yeah, quite as arguable, right? It's not football, but
yeah,
it's more popular than a lot of people from other countries
yeah. Because
think.
I
Yeah.
don't think in Bulgaria we have golf like courses. We have maybe several which are spread across the country, but you can count them on my hand. So that was interesting to know.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's all I have. Thank you for your time, Elmar.
No, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.